This lecture will deal with selection and the selection process. Remember where the selection function fits in to the integrated human resource management function. We have in the past looked at how human resource planning influences job descriptions and job specifications, and that those are used in determining what would be the requirements for the position when a position is recruited for. Now, selection then happens after the applicants have submitted their applications. One might ask, what is selection? Selection is choosing the best candidate for the position, and that means reviewing the applicant's qualifications, their experience, also considering what the equity requirements for the organization is. Ultimately, selection is about making a judgment whether or not a person would be fit for the position. Who is then involved in making this decision? Human resource usually takes the lead in the process, but they have to involve others from the departments as well. And for instance, depending on the level on which the position is placed, if for instance you are recruiting a senior manager, then unions, other senior managers, as well as the line manager will all be involved in the selecting through shortlisting and then the actual interview taking place. If the human resource unit is responsible for taking the lead, that means that this particular function is centralized in the organization. And through centralization, costs that are incurred in the recruitment process can be minimalized. The human resource specialist also then ensures that there is complete compliance with legislation. And because they do not have any influence or knowledge of the applicants, it may decrease the bias in terms of who is shortlisted in the process. The HR unit through the HR practitioner will then also be involved in the interview process itself. The responsibility of the manager is to ensure that they also work through the applications and that they are involved in determining who will be finally shortlisted and interviewed as possible candidates for the vacancy. They are thus involved in the interviews themselves and have the responsibility of making sure that the interviewee has the right qualifications, skills, and experience that would be needed to fill this particular vacancy. The managers would have valuable insights about the culture within their team, about the work that their team is responsible for, and would then have good insights in terms of whether or not the applicant would fit into the team that they are responsible for. So the manager is responsible for evaluating the applicant's qualifications and making sure that they meet the minimum requirements for the position. Now, in terms of the selection framework and the selection process, in the selection framework, it provides an overview of where selection fits in and how the organizational goals influence the eventual decisions, selection decisions. Through job design, duties of the job are determined, which gives the setting or sets the setting for criteria that may be used in determining whether or not an employee would be successful. The job description and job specification is generated from job analysis and specifies the duties and responsibilities, as well as the traits, the skills, and the background that an individual must have to qualify for the job. Ideally, Competencies are accurately identified that link individual competencies to organizational objectives. And this will improve the overall performance because employee behavior would be better aligned with the organizational values. Next, the recruitment takes place, and the end result would be a pool of suitable applicants from where a suitable candidate can be chosen. Finally, the panel must determine which combination of interviews, tests, and assessments or other selection devices will be used in the selection process. Remember that the Employment Equity Act has very particular specifications as to when additional recruitment tests may be useful in making a selection decision. The steps in the selection process are presented as 8 individual steps, and I will be going through them all separately. The initial screening is when the HR department must spend time on the selection process by removing obviously unqualified or undesirable applicants. The initial screening determines whether the applicant has the critical job specifications and requirements as stipulated by the Employment Equity Act, and this will expedite the departure of the unqualified applicant to minimize the total cost of the selection process. Having application blanks or forms means that this particular all applicants will be measured against an application blank. Now, an application blank would be an ideally completed application form, and every candidate can then be measured against what ideally the position would require. And this would then help make the HR unit match the most suitably qualified candidates to the possible vacancy. The procedure involves placing a value or a score for the items on the application blank that has been found to predict successful job performance. Applicants receive points according to the information that they report on the form, and that can be ranked then to inform what would or who would fit the profile for the post the best. Please remember that in both the initial screening as well as in the application blank, the CV is the primary source of information that the HR unit will use. There are some warning signs that might require further investigation and that might mean that a candidate is removed after initial screening. Some of the warning signs in the CV would be time gaps in employment, vague information such as incomplete or incorrect addresses or contact information from former employers, vague or no reasons provided for leaving previous employment, a lack of employment history, inconsistencies in the salary history, inconsistencies in job levels that were held, when all previous employers are out of business, when contact details of references are incorrect. So the importance of the CV in making the right decision, in the initial making the right decision of choosing the right candidate, is very important. Now, interviews. Interviews are used for the purpose to determine 3 basic things. Namely, does the applicant have the ability to perform the job? Will the applicant be motivated to be successful? And will the applicant match the needs of the organization? While I will go into some of the problems that are associated with the interviews, first let's look at what constitutes effective interviewing. There are 8 considerations. The first one being the setting. and that there must be a system of written records and formalized procedures for the interview. Documentation must be available so that the entire panel has equal access to all documents that may inform their decision, that there is standardization and all applicants are asked the same questions, that the panel understands how to score and what should be scored and what they should be looking out for, that they review the specifications of the particular job before each interview. Since the interviewer may see applicants for different jobs, the important aspects of each job must be fresh in the interviewer's mind. Reviewing the application blank, looking at what would be the ideal candidate. Very important is to train the interviewer to recognize their own personal bias and other possible detriments to the interview's reliability. And then also to be able to ask job-related questions, and that they do not waste time by straying from the subject or delving into personal areas which could be seen as discriminatory. Pre-employment testing has been used to determine what the competency of a particular candidate is. And recognition should be given that within the public sector, there are restrictions as to when and what type of pre-employment tests can be used. But pre-employment testing can increase the reliability and the validity of the entire selection process, as long as that pre-employment test has been scientifically shown to be valid and reliable, can be applied fairly to all employees, and is not biased against any employee or group. Next, reference checking is the checking of backgrounds of prospective employees, and this has become increasingly necessary over the years. Such an investigation can be both an energy-saving procedure and a cost-efficient means of screening out undesirable applicants. Some of the advantages of appropriate referencing or reference checking is that immediate clarification of significant issues can be gained. More information can generally be obtained through those mailed forms or through the conversations that you have via the telephone. It's relatively inexpensive, and additional areas of needed inquiry can be uncovered during the conversation. A structured form can be used, which makes a fast, efficient conversation possible, and it helps to generate the necessary documentation for the findings. Depending on the nature of the position, a medical examination may also be required, and this then means that the final decision of who to employ may be based and may take into consideration the results of the medical examination. When the selection decision results in the hiring of an employee who is successful on the job, then the cost of the selection decision is the normal cost of filling a vacant position. But when the selection decision leads to an unqualified person being incorrectly appointed, then the employee performs poorly, there would be employee losses of self-esteem due to poor performance, and this forgoes the rewards associated with good performance. Peers may suffer the consequences of poorly performing employees. The expectations of your clients could not be met. Managers fail to meet their objectives. There may be injuries or accidents on duties, and employees eventually must find a new job, creating additional costs, and that contributes to turnover. Record keeping means that in terms of the Employment Equity Act, as well as the Labor Relations Act, it has become necessary for organizations to keep a complete set of records pertaining to the recruitment and the selection of all staff. This is in an effort to prove that there has been no discrimination against any individual. It is also recommended that the documents from every step of the process be kept, from the copies of the advertisements to the contracts of employment agencies to CVs to the final decisions for hiring or rejecting any of the candidates. In conclusion, there are certain problems that can be associated with the interviews. The first one being subjectivity. And this relates to the validity and the reliability of the interviewer during the process. The interviewer may have certain bias, and this will influence the candidates and their choices. All interviewees come from different backgrounds and contexts, and they may not understand the questions in the same way. Structuring questions are important so that they can understand what is actually meant by each question and that they can answer it correctly. Training the panel so that they know what to listen for and what it is that they actually want from the interviewee is required. They should also understand what their role in the panel is. You have a limited number of people being interviewed, and finding the right fit is not easy. Asking the right question to test the ability is a skill, and knowing what to listen for and whether the applicant will be a good fit remains challenging to the organization. The repercussions of choosing the wrong person can be very costly. So, in summary, selection follows the recruitment process where a pool of available and qualified applicants are made available. An interview is the most commonly used selection tool, but can be supplemented by pre-employment testing. And we need to remember that recruitment and selection is ultimately about profiling the candidate and choosing the most suitable candidate to be attracted for the position.